everyone. I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today, I would like to discuss with you some of the signs that you may experience of lack of internal integration for regardless of how you identify gender-wise, because you see gender transition, as a lot of you do know, is not only all about external work, meaning it's not all about actually taking steps such as medical hormones or surgeries, voice training, hair removal process, and all other steps in order to modify secondary sex characteristics. Those are all external steps and they're important, but there's also an internal work that absolutely cannot be neglected. And unfortunately, what I see a lot of times is people start their gender transition and they really hyper focus on all of the steps that are focused on the exterior, on the physical aspects of yourself, which makes complete sense because for a lot of you, those secondary sex characteristics give you a tremendous amount of dysphoria. So the first step is often to alleviate that by taking those steps. And then I also know that some people, they tend to go through gender transition really quickly, depending on access to the resources. And some people are, depending where you are in a country, and you access to care, or lack, I should say, access to care. For you, those steps are set so far away, maybe even several years from today, even things such simple as hormones, where you have to wait a long period of time. And because you're struggling with dysphoria, a lot of times it can be very painful because you're so focusing on that external, and I absolutely understand why. So trust me when I say that a lot of you are focusing on the external. It's not saying with a judgment, it's saying that, yes, that is going to happen, that is bound to happen. But when we do that, the internal integration of yourself and your internal relationship to yourself tends to be often neglected. And what I often see is when people complete their gender transition, whatever it may be for them, in terms of achieving level of congruency or alleviation of dysphoria that they feel, they still continue to struggle, and primarily because that integration of relationship to themselves has not really taken place. Some of the signs that a person has not really integrated their sense of self, have not really, when I say integration, what I mean is we can just form an external relationship with ourselves and our bodies and our image and how we look. We also have to form an internal relationship with ourselves. What does it mean for us to be of this particular gender? And dig deeper in understanding what it means for all of us beyond stereotypes, what it specifically means for us as individuals, and build a relationship with that side of ourselves. So for a lot of people, what I see, some of the signs that has not happened yet is they have completed their transition and they say that suddenly they feel congruent, but they continue to struggle accepting themselves. It's almost like this um, external shift did happen, but the internal shift has not happened yet. Externally, they have become the person they want to be. Internally, they still struggle to accept and to embrace the person that they are. That's definitely the first sign that more integration, that you need to spend more time working on yourself, going deep into yourself, that's needed. Another very common sign is that this integration, deep internal integration, has not taken place or is not really fully there yet, although we all integrate throughout our life, we'll continue to do it into our adulthood and until we die. So the second sign is when you have achieved congruency and you feel more congruent, but yet you continue to feel a sense of dysphoria. Where is the dysphoria now coming from? Is it social dysphoria? And if so, why is there social dysphoria? Is it perhaps because you still feel very hyper-focused in terms of being in your gender when you're out in public? Is it because you're still terrified that people are going to find out that you're transgender? What is it that's causing you social dysphoria? Why is it that now that you feel congruent, you're still experiencing dysphoria, social or otherwise? That's often also a sign that some internal work has not fully happened yet. Because remember, our relationship to our gender it's not only external, it's also very deeply internal. And for a lot of you, the internal doesn't necessarily begin until you start getting close to congruency, because so much of our relationship to ourselves also has to do with our relationship to the world. So that's going to be the second sign, is when you're still not really feeling happy, you're still experiencing dysphoria, but you're feeling the congruency that you have achieved. That's how you know that the integration still haven't happened. Those are probably the two most common signs. Um, People feel congruent, but still very unhappy and feel dysphoria, and people um, struggling to accept themselves. Acceptance by far is going to be the biggest one. It is the most challenging one. So how can you start cultivating and working on forming a relationship with yourself? For starters, therapy obviously is great, but I know that it's a luxury for a lot of people. The second best to therapy is journaling. If you're not somebody who writes in journals, can you speak things out loud in a maybe a recording? What other forms of medium can you employ? Writing down what your gender means to you. How do you understand your gender? What are complexities of your gender? What things about your gender that you yet still feel like you need to understand is going to be really, really important to you. Just sitting down with yourself and exploring how are you navigating your life now in your authenticity. What challenges are coming up to it? What is coming up to the surface that is making it difficult for you? What do you enjoy the most? All of the things are going to give you a deeper understanding of who you are. A lot of times people struggle because they have, again, achieved this external representation of how they see themselves, but internally they feel like they're still carrying so much of their old selves. And remember, I always say it's not healthy to fully annihilate your old self. You need to find an integration in that regard too. But it's also very, very important to explore why there's such clinginess and resistance, and why the parts of the old selves that are no longer serving you are still there, and why they tend to not to go away. Sometimes integration, this internal process of integration, can be very challenging for a lot of you, because you, even though you have achieved physical congruency, you're still surrounded by people who known you before. Maybe you're surrounded by people who are maybe your family. A lot of times this is older parents who unfortunately continue to misgender you. All of those things can cause kind of an internal disarray and kind of cognitive dissonance, if you will, for a lot of you. And that can make internal integration difficult. But we all have to form relationship ourselves. We all have to find out who we are, not just in relationship to our gender, but in relationship to our deeper sense of self. And that starts with this deeper work, sitting down with ourselves. So I really encourage for a lot of you that, especially if you feel congruent, you feel like you have completed your gender transition, and you feel that you are struggling to accepting yourself, or that you're still not happy and you're still feeling dysphoria, really start sitting with yourself and really cultivate this relationship with yourself. Now, another thing that I'm going to say is that for people who are waiting to take steps towards physical transition, if that's something you want to do, and you're in a country or in a place where it's a long, long time period to wait for, my suggestion to all of you is to also start focusing on this internal self. I know it's challenging because you wanted physical aspects, but again, don't neglect your internal self. I often see the reverse is true. People who tend to because of lack of access to care, their physical, if you will, transition in terms of modifying secondary sex characteristics took longer during the time. If they took time to integrate themselves and to work on themselves internally, when they finish, they tend to be really more cohesive, more wholesome, if you will. And people who had physical transition happen really fast for them because access to resources, then once they finish, then they have to work on the integration. It tends to just pattern-wise go like that. So comment below, let me know if you struggled with this. How do you understand relationship to yourself? What do you do to cultivate your relationship to yourself? What tends to be very helpful to you? Comment below, let me know, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.